Imagine the one place you feel safest, your home, turning into your worst nightmare. These aren't just campfire tales, but real-life horror stories that unfolded behind closed doors. Welcome to a chilling journey into the unknown, where ordinary homes become the backdrop for unsettling, terrifying experiences. From eerie whispers in the walls to haunted objects with minds of their own, these 5 true stories will make you question what might be lurking in the shadows of your own home. Story number 1. I used to live with my ex-boyfriend a few years ago. We had recently moved into a 2-bedroom house and were in the process of furnishing it. Since there was only one bathroom in the house and you had to pass through that bedroom to get to it, we converted the back bedroom into an office. In addition, we frequently had guests crash on our couch, and we disliked the thought of them having to enter our bedroom at night in order to use the restroom. It was awkward and a little too close to home. We had been in the house for around a month at the time of this incident. My partner was out with his colleagues, so I spent the evening alone at home. I was getting settled for a normal night by myself in this peaceful house. I ate takeaway and watched TV in the early evening. I would sometimes hear strange noises, like creaks and bumps, but they would stop when I tried to concentrate on them to identify what they were. I made the decision to head upstairs and use the computer for a while before retiring to bed as it grew later. I was using a paid-as-you-go phone that was out of credit at the time, and our phone line hadn't been set up yet. That night, I was alone in the house and unable to contact or make a call to anyone. The room was fairly dark when I sat there in the bedroom in the back, lit only by a tiny table light that gave off a weak glimmer. I was concentrating on typing on my laptop when I heard the odd noises once more. I initially thought I was imagining a faint, rattling noise, so subtle that I had to focus hard to determine whether it was real or not. I thus switched off my music so I could pay closer attention and try to identify what it was. After that, I entered our bedroom and peered out the front door, but nobody was there. After that, I returned to the bedroom at the back and looked out the window, but it was too dark to see anything properly. There was no light in the small yard we had, bounded by a high brick wall and a sturdy wooden gate. It looked like there was nothing outdoors based on my limited vision. I took a seat again and cranked the music. 10 minutes or so later, there was a spooky screeching sound that sounded like metal scratching against metal. It was so faint, as if the source of it was making a valiant effort to be silent. I went into our bedroom to get a big iron rod we had previously discovered in the back of the closet because I was starting to get really afraid at this time. Since I was unsure of what was happening and didn't want to draw attention to myself inside the house to any potential intruders, I didn't turn on any lights. I returned with caution to the office bedroom, discreetly shut the door, and secured it. To ensure that the door stayed closed, I also placed a chair below the doorknob. Nothing further occurred for around 20 minutes. Since it was my first night alone in the house, I began to feel a little ridiculous for getting fired up. I didn't turn the music back on, though, this time. I'm glad I refrained from turning the music back on because I could hear whispers. 2 men speaking gently to each other. It didn't appear like they were coming from the home. The office bedroom window was partly open, and the murmurs seemed to be coming from outside. In an attempt to gain a closer look at the alley behind the house, I went inside the bathroom. Around the yard, the office, bedroom, and bathroom formed a L shape, with the bathroom protruding beyond. I gently opened the bathroom window after climbing up onto the ledge in an attempt to get a glimpse of the alley. The murmuring seemed to be coming from directly behind my gate, even though I was unable to see anything. It also became louder. Even though I was unable to understand what they were saying, I deduced that these individuals had observed our move and realized we owned a lot of expensive furniture, electronics, TVs, guitars, and DSLR cameras. I reasoned that they were aware of my isolation and were merely waiting for me to nod off before breaking into the house. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity until I heard a loud thud. They were trying to burst through my gate, and they had given up on being quiet. Observing the gate quiver and tremble with every blow, I could only surmise the strength of these warriors. Being a little woman now, I was frightened to see my gate buckle beneath the strain. While I sat there clutching the iron rod, I tried to come up with a spot to hide from them. I was suddenly blinded by a dazzling light. I thought they were shining a flashlight at the back of the house, so I ran and hid, but then I heard shouting and barking. I noticed that the house across the alley from us had put on a floodlight as I looked outside once more. I heard 2 pairs of footsteps sprinting down the alley, followed by some cursing and groaning. I was stuck in that bedroom in the rear until about 4 in the morning, when my ex-boyfriend staggered in. I didn't get any sleep that night, and when I woke up and walked into the yard, I noticed that my gate was hanging on just one hinge, which made it simple for someone to enter from the alley. Upon inspecting the back of the gate, I also noticed that the lock was damaged, seemingly from someone trying to pry it open. It gives me pause to consider what may have happened if the house across the alley hadn't turned on its light. Story number 2. Even though it happened more than 20 years ago, I can still clearly recall it. My son was delivered at 32 weeks gestation. He didn't have many issues, which was good for us because we were able to bring him home after a month. His heartbeat was slow, and he required air and caffeine. However, strange things began to happen once we arrived home. Despite my constant efforts to remove him from his room prior to his birth, our cat refused to enter it. Our dog used to tilt his head when he sat at the bottom of the steps, as if he was listening to something. Occasionally, I would talk to my son while changing his diaper because I thought his father had entered the room. I was alone though when I turned around. My son received a peekaboo huge bird toy from a friend that made noises when its eyes were covered and opened. Even after I placed the toy in a box in the closet, it would constantly go off on its own. Often, I had the impression that I wasn't home alone. As a gift, my parents had given us an Angel Care baby monitor. We placed a pad beneath the mattress to detect movement from the monitor, which was programmed to sound an alarm after a predetermined amount of time. Considering that our son weighed barely 5 pounds when he was brought home. Now, every time the alarm went off, I would usually get up, walk into his room, switch off the alarm, and see how he was doing. He was never in trouble. My infant is so small that the pad was unable to detect his breathing. Thus, I never considered any other reason why the alert was going off. I used to dream about a woman in his room a lot during this period. I never got a good look at her. All I saw was the silhouette of a long-haired woman reaching into his cot. My son has been home for at least a month, although I can't recall precisely how long. He continued to take coffee and oxygen. Our bed was on the left side of the entrance in our bedroom. One night, though, I was sound sleeping when I heard someone giving me a hard shake on the side of the bed closest to the door. When I looked at my husband when I woke up and asked him why he was shaking me, I saw that he was sound asleep and had fallen asleep on the wrong side of the bed. I hurried to my son's room after getting up. I heard a gasp coming from the crib when I turned on the light, something I had never done before. You only need to shock a baby to get them to start breathing again when they stop unexpectedly. Turning on the light caused my son to start breathing again, even though I genuinely thought he had stopped. Following that, my kid continued to have unusual dreams about things like acting strangely around pets and a toy that would explode on its own until he stopped needing air and coffee. I genuinely thought that someone had brought him home to keep him safe because the animal stopped acting strangely and the large bird toy never went off by itself. Since I'm Canadian, I assumed it was a young, Indigenous woman, perhaps in her 20s, based on my visions. She kept an eye on him and woke me up that night so I could scare my kid back to consciousness. For that, I will always be grateful. If these stories made you uneasy, just remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't in the dark corners of the world, but right where you live. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more chilling tales. And maybe double check that your doors are locked tonight. Stay safe, if you can.